new church that Mason had toured during his return to the future 2 years earlier. The future, the 21st century. That was his rightful time. At least it was. This was his life now. 300 years in the past from his former life as a federal air marshal. A lot had happened since being hurled through those years by a freak storm over the Atlantic, with a plane load of accidental time travelers. He glanced to his right at his wife, the former Karen James, one of the attendants on that ill-fated flight. She held the tiny hand of their almost 2-year-old son, Michael, who was growing impatient and beginning to fidget. To Mason's left stood Jeremy and Lisa Jackson, the only other remaining survivors from that flight. The 4 of them, now 5, were carving a living from a rice plantation. Their success had been in large part due to the man lying in the casket before them. A man clearing his throat brought Mason from his reverie. Mason raised his head and turned his attention to that man. He was young, mid-30s, and he stood tall and straight. Reverend Alexander Gardner's thoughtful eyes scanned the gathering before clearing his throat again. I didn't know William very well, but I do know he contributed much to this community. The Reverend cited Rhett's many deeds. He spoke with passion and compassion, as men of God often do. But in truth, Mason was well aware that William Rhett of late had found himself on the wrong side of the community's conventional wisdom. In 1719, during the bloodless coup when nearly everyone opted for crown rule over the Carolina colony, Rhett sided with the former colony proprietors, a private consortium of aristocratic English owners. Rhett and Trott, preferring independent governance, were the 2 loudest voices against the crown. That position put them on the outs with the vast majority of residents. Mason scanned the somber faces in the crowd. All of Rhett's major detractors were in attendance, for even they recognized Charlestown may well not have survived had it not been for the man in the coffin. When Reverend Gardner stopped talking, several men circled the grave and positioned ropes under both ends of the casket. They pulled the ropes taut and lifted the casket, while other men removed the boards. The casket was then slowly lowered into the ground. The Reverend gave a slight nod at Sarah. She stepped forward, took a handful of earth from the nearby mound, and let the grains sift through her fingers and fall onto the casket. Each member of the family did the same, followed by the Trotts, and then others from the crowd wishing to show their respect. Mason and his cadre joined the queue. Each paused for a moment to say a silent prayer after depositing a handful of dirt. When Mason and Karen had paid their respects a final time, they made their way over to Sarah, Rhett, and the children. "He will be missed," Mason said. Sarah looked around at the crowd beginning to disperse. "By some." "We appreciate everyone who came out," William Jr. said. "If there's anything we can do," Karen said, "please don't hesitate to ask. We'd be happy to help." Sarah tightened her arm wrapped around William Jr.'s waist. "William here has been handling the day-to-day for some time." William Rhett's manner of death was a matter of history. A stroke is what Mason had read of the account, so he elected to forego the questions many others had already asked. "Charlie and I will stop by in a few days to see how you're doing." Sarah looked around the thinning crowd. "Where is that Charlie Sievert?" Mason spotted him with a shovel in his hand, pitching dirt into the grave along with 3 other men. "He hasn't said much," Sarah said. "It was quite a shock for all of us, but especially for Charlie," Karen said. "He's dealing with it in his own way." "He would be the first to step up if you needed anything," Mason said. "I know," Sarah said. "Charlie can be a real rascal, but he's a good man." Mason stared at Charlie. This was one of the few times Mason had seen him completely sober. He turned back to Sarah. "When will the vault be finished?" 2 or 3 weeks, she said. "They're engraving the lid." "If I can, I'd like to be there when the colonel is laid to his final rest," Mason said. He looked around as Jeremy and Lisa approached. "We all would." "Of course," Sarah said with a slight smile. Mason shook hands with William Jr. and Mr. Trott, winked at the children, and then put his arm around Karen's shoulders. "See you in a few..."